It didn't roll out like a normal release. It detonated. The moment that footage surfaced from 50 Cent's documentary, the entire timeline shifted in real time. Not gradually, not with buildup, instantly. And at the center of the storm, T.I.'s wife. According to viral reactions spreading across social platforms, newly surfaced material triggered an emotional response so intense that people online are describing it as a breaking point. Not a reaction, not a comment. A collapse in real time. And what's making this even more unsettling is how specific the claims are. This wasn't random footage stitched together for shock value. At least, that's what insiders are suggesting. They say it was targeted material, pulled from moments that were never meant to resurface in public again. Private fragments, old context, emotional situations frozen in time and reintroduced without warning. If that's even partially true, then this isn't just storytelling anymore. It's exposure. And timing matters. Because this didn't drop quietly. It dropped into an already volatile conversation, where speculation around T.I., his family, and past controversies has been circulating for years without anything concrete enough to settle it. Until now. The second clips began circulating, the internet didn't just react, it locked in. Every frame got replayed. Every pause got analyzed. Every expression got interpreted like evidence in a case no one agreed on but everyone was watching. And suddenly, the focus narrowed. Not just on the footage itself, but on her reaction. Reports started spreading that she was overwhelmed, emotional, unable to process what she was seeing unfold publicly. And whether those reports are fully accurate or exaggerated, the perception alone was enough to shift the entire narrative. Because people aren't just reacting to content anymore. They're reacting to emotion inside the content. And that changes everything. To understand why this hits so hard, you have to understand the weight behind it. T.I. and his family have lived under public scrutiny for years, a carefully managed image, a public identity built on strength, structure, and control. Even through controversy, they maintained a sense of stability in how they presented themselves. But the internet never forgets friction points. And now those old conversations are resurfacing, not as rumors this time, but as context layered over new visuals. That's where things become complicated. Because when old narratives meet new footage, interpretation becomes unstable. People stop asking what happened and start asking what it means. And meaning spreads faster than truth. Then there's the presence of 50 Cent in all of this. His reputation alone changes how people perceive the situation, not just as an artist, but as someone who understands narrative tension, how attention moves, how controversy escalates, how stories evolve once they enter public circulation. So when his documentary began revealing material tied to this family, people didn't see it as accidental. They saw it as intentional structure. And that perception is part of why the reaction has been so divided. One side calls it truth being exposed. The other calls it boundaries being crossed. But both sides agree on one thing: this isn't normal celebrity content anymore. Because now it feels personal. And once that line is crossed in public perception, control becomes almost impossible. Meanwhile, the emotional focus keeps returning to her reaction, not because she's the only subject, but because emotion is the most relatable point in a situation full of speculation. People see distress and interpret impact. People see silence and interpret weight. And when those two combine, the internet fills in the gaps aggressively. That's why clips are being slowed down, rewatched, broken apart frame by frame across platforms like TikTok and YouTube, each analysis trying to reconstruct a story from fragments instead of full context. But here's the part nobody can ignore. The footage itself is no longer the only trigger. the reaction to the footage has become the story. And that's why everything feels unstable. Because every new interpretation creates a new layer of controversy. Every breakdown adds another angle. Every silence from the people involved increases speculation. And right now, there is still no clear, direct response from the main figures involved. That silence isn't neutral anymore. It's becoming part of the narrative. And in situations like this, silence doesn't stop speculation, it accelerates it. So the conversation keeps expanding. From what was shown, to what was left out, to what might come next, and whether this was just one part of a larger release strategy, or something already fully revealed in fragments. And that uncertainty is what keeps the entire situation unstable. Because if this is only one piece of a bigger release, then the emotional reaction we've already seen might not even be the peak. It might just be the beginning. And that's the part that's unsettling everyone watching this unfold. Because no one knows where it stops. And no one knows what comes next. Real time. That's how people started consuming it. Not watching casually, studying it. Rewinding, pausing, zooming in, frame by frame, trying to catch anything they might have missed the first time. And the more they looked, the more the reaction shifted from curiosity to concern. Because according to viral interpretations online, the footage coming from 50 Cent's documentary didn't just show ordinary moments. It allegedly showed emotionally charged exchanges, situations that felt heavy, uncomfortable, and difficult for viewers to process without context. And that's where everything changed. Because once people started reacting in real time, the internet didn't treat it like entertainment anymore. It treated it like evidence. Some clips were described as tense, others as emotionally vulnerable, and a few moments, according to viewers, crossed into territory that felt deeply uncomfortable to watch without understanding the full situation behind them. But here's the problem. There is no full confirmed context. And in that gap, interpretation takes over. The narrative starts building itself. And right at the center of that narrative sits T.I.'s family, especially his wife, who quickly became the emotional focus of the entire situation. Because reports began circulating that her reaction wasn't just visible, it was overwhelming. Not staged, not public-facing, but deeply personal. Sources close to the situation described it as a moment where everything hit at once. Not just the footage itself, but what it represented. The history, the memories, the weight of being watched while something personal is being interpreted by millions of strangers. And that's what makes this different from typical celebrity drama. It isn't just content being consumed. It's emotion being dissected. And once that starts happening, control disappears. But then came the first major twist. Because as the clips continued spreading, a new wave of claims began surfacing online, suggesting that what people were seeing might not be the full picture. That the footage may have been presented without complete context. And that one idea changed everything. Because suddenly, people weren't just reacting anymore, they were questioning. Was this the full story, or just selected moments arranged to create a specific emotional response? Some viewers began pointing out what they believed were cuts in the footage, missing transitions, abrupt edits, moments that seemed like they started in the middle and ended too quickly. And that's where a new theory exploded across platforms like TikTok and YouTube. Framing, not just showing what happened, but shaping how it's perceived. And that idea is what split the internet in two. One side believes this is raw exposure, unfiltered reality being shown without censorship. The other side believes it's selective storytelling, moments arranged to create impact, not full understanding. And both sides are convinced they're right. But the tension didn't stop there. Because another claim started circulating, quiet at first, then spreading fast. That T.I. may have known this footage existed before it was ever released. Unconfirmed, unverified, but powerful enough to shift how people interpret everything. Because if he knew, then his silence isn't just absence, it becomes part of the narrative itself. And silence in situations like this is never neutral. It gets interpreted, filled in, amplified. Meanwhile, the internet continues spiraling. More clips, more breakdowns, more theories. Every new post adds another layer to an already unstable story. And the most unsettling part is this. Just when people thought they had seen the most intense material, another claim surfaced. There may be more footage. Not clips already circulating. Not fragments already analyzed. But additional unreleased material still sitting somewhere behind the scenes. And that idea alone changed the entire emotional temperature of the situation. Because if what's already public caused this much reaction, then what hasn't been released could be something entirely different. Something bigger, something more complete, or something that completely reshapes everything people think they understand. And that uncertainty is what keeps pushing the situation forward. Not answers, questions. Because every layer that gets added doesn't close the story, it expands it. And now the conversation is no longer just about what was shown. It's about why it was shown this way. Was it storytelling? Was it strategy? Was it truth? Or was it something designed to provoke reaction in real time? And once that question enters the conversation, there's no going back. Because now every clip is being rewatched differently. Every moment is being reinterpreted. Every silence feels heavier. And every new rumor feels like it could be the one that finally changes everything. But the truth is, nothing is confirmed. No full explanation has been given. No full context has been revealed. And no final version of the story has been seen. Which is why the situation still feels unfinished. Because right now, the internet isn't watching a conclusion. It's watching a process. A story still unfolding. And nobody knows what the next release, the next reaction, or the next silence will do to it. But one thing is clear. This isn't slowing down. It's building. And the next turn might be the one that changes how everything is understood. Something started shifting behind the scenes. Quiet at first, almost unnoticeable. But once people started paying attention, it became impossible to ignore. Interactions connected to T.I. and his wife began disappearing from public view. Posts that were once visible were suddenly gone. Mentions slowed down. Engagement across certain circles dropped in a way that felt coordinated rather than random. And in celebrity culture, that kind of behavior usually signals one thing: damage control. Because damage control doesn't happen when things are fine. It happens when something is starting to spiral out of control. And right now, the entire situation feels like it's spinning faster than anyone can manage. At the center of it all remains T.I.'s wife, whose reaction has become one of the most discussed emotional points in the entire narrative. According to updated insider claims, what people initially saw as a single emotional moment was actually only the surface, not the beginning and not the end. Because once the footage from 50 Cent's documentary went viral, there was no escaping it. It didn't stay in one place, it spread everywhere. Clips circulated across platforms, discussions multiplied, interpretations stacked on top of each other. And every time she was exposed to the conversation online, it wasn't just the footage repeating, it was the reaction to it repeating too. Same clips, same debates, same breakdowns. Again and again. And that creates something people underestimate until they experience it: emotional overload. Because it's not just about seeing something once, it's about being unable to escape it afterward. Every scroll, every feed refresh, every trending topic, the same images resurfacing in different forms, each one carrying a different opinion attached to it. And according to insiders, that's where the deeper emotional impact began. Not shock alone, not sadness alone, but exhaustion. The kind that comes from having no control over how your reality is being interpreted by millions of people at the same time. And while the internet continued dissecting every frame, another layer of the situation quietly emerged. A claim that changed the direction of the entire conversation. Because according to news circulating reports, the footage that went viral may not even represent the most intense parts of the documentary. Let that sit for a second. What people reacted to might not be the full weight of what was recorded. Insiders are now suggesting there are additional scenes, longer sequences, more context-heavy moments that have not been widely released or pushed into circulation. Scenes that could shift interpretation entirely. Scenes that could either clarify what people think they saw or completely overturn it. But here's the problem. Those scenes aren't part of the public conversation yet. And that creates a gap where speculation grows faster than facts. Because once a partial narrative becomes viral, it starts to solidify. People begin forming conclusions based on incomplete information, and those conclusions become harder to undo even if new evidence appears later. That's why this moment feels so unstable. Because the question is no longer just what happened. It's why only certain parts are being seen. And who decides that? Some voices within the industry have started hinting at something broader. Not directly naming the situation, but pointing toward a larger issue in how narratives are constructed through editing and selective release. One commentator described it bluntly. What people see is not always the full event. It's a version shaped by what gets included and what gets left out. Another added that context is what changes everything. Without it, audiences aren't watching reality. They're watching interpretation. And that idea is what's now fueling the deeper debate. Because if interpretation is being guided, even unintentionally, then the emotional reaction from the public is also being shaped. And that's where things become uncomfortable. Not just for the audience, but for everyone involved. Meanwhile, pressure continues to build from all directions. Fans demand clarity. Supporters defend the family. Critics question the intent behind the release. And the silence from key figures only adds more fuel to the speculation. Because when no one clarifies anything, people start filling in the blanks themselves. And those blanks stay neutral. They turn into theories, then narratives, then truths in the public mind. And once that happens, reversing it becomes nearly impossible. But the most unsettling part of all of this is what comes next. Because according to ongoing whispers online, more footage may still be coming. Additional material, unreleased context, extended scenes. And depending on what those contain, the entire perception of the situation could either stabilize or completely collapse again. That possibility is what's keeping the internet locked in. Because this no longer feels like a finished story. It feels like a rolling release of fragments, each one shifting understanding slightly further than the last. And at this point, no one is fully sure where the center of the story even is anymore. Only that something bigger is still unfolding beneath the surface. And whatever drops next may not just add to the conversation. It may redefine it entirely. The internet split instantly. On one side, there was empathy. Raw, immediate emotional empathy. People expressing sympathy for T.I.'s wife, calling the situation overwhelming, invasive, and unfair, a moment they felt should never have been pushed into public view in the first place. One viral comment captured that sentiment perfectly. Imagine having one of your most emotional moments turned into content for millions to watch. That's not fair. Another added, "This isn't entertainment. This is someone's real life being replayed over and over again." And those reactions spread fast. Because people didn't just see footage, they felt the weight of it. They imagined what it would be like to have something deeply personal turned into a global conversation. A moment that should belong to one person, suddenly belonging to millions of strangers with opinions. But on the other side of the internet, the reaction was completely different. Less emotional, more analytical, more direct. Some viewers weren't focusing on how the footage made people feel. They were focusing on what it showed and what it implied. One trending response said, "If it's real, then it deserves to be talked about. You can't hide behind privacy forever." Another added, "People only care about privacy when it's uncomfortable. Truth is truth." And just like that, the internet became a battlefield of perspectives. Empathy versus exposure. Privacy versus accountability. Emotion versus interpretation. And neither side was backing down. But what made this situation even more intense was that it wasn't just fans arguing anymore. Industry voices started stepping in. Influencers, media commentators, public figures who don't usually engage in situations like this began posting cryptic, indirect messages that clearly pointed toward the unfolding controversy without naming it directly. One post read, "People forget how powerful editing is. You can make any story depending on what you show and what you don't." Another said, "Everyone reacts to clips. Very few wait for full context." And that's when the conversation shifted again. Because suddenly, the debate wasn't just about what people saw. It was about whether what they saw was even complete. And once that doubt enters the picture, everything becomes unstable. Because if trust in the footage breaks, interpretation takes over completely. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, something else started happening quietly. Subtle distance, unfollowed accounts, deleted mentions, silence from people who normally wouldn't stay silent. And in celebrity culture, silence is never meaningless. It signals movement, even when nothing is officially said. Then came the moment that pushed everything into a new phase. A viral post began circulating across platforms like TikTok and YouTube. It didn't include proof. It didn't include confirmation. Just one sentence. "What you saw isn't even the worst part." And that was enough. Because now the entire internet shifted from reacting to waiting. Watching, refreshing, speculating. Because if more footage exists, then the story isn't finished. It's still being built. And nobody knows what direction it's going to take. Will it confirm what people believe? Or completely overturn it? That uncertainty is what keeps the situation alive. But then came another layer. A new insider claim, unverified but widely discussed, suggesting that what people are reacting to might not even represent the full reality of the situation. That the viral clips could be part of a larger set of footage that hasn't been released yet. More context, more interaction, more explanation. Or potentially something that changes interpretation entirely. And if that's true, then the emotional response online might be built on incomplete understanding. Not necessarily false, but not complete. And that distinction matters more than people realize. Because incomplete narratives are dangerous. They lock in perception before the full picture is known. And once that happens, even new information struggle. ease to change it. At the center of all this remains T.I., whose silence is now being interpreted in multiple ways. Some see restraint, others see calculation, others see uncertainty. But silence, in moments like this, becomes part of the story whether intended or not. And alongside him, his wife remains at the emotional core of the entire situation, seen, discussed, analyzed, but not publicly speaking. And that absence of direct voice only intensifies the speculation. Because the more silence continues, the more the internet fills it with interpretation. And those interpretations rarely stay neutral. They evolve, they expand, they collide. Then another rumor surfaced, one that hasn't fully gone viral yet, but is gaining traction. That additional unseen footage may exist. Scenes that could provide deeper context, or completely reframe what has already been shown. And that possibility changes everything again. Because now people aren't just asking what happened. They're asking what hasn't been shown yet. And why? At the same time, another theory began circulating. That the way the documentary is being released may not be accidental at all. That it might be structured for emotional impact, designed to trigger reaction in stages. Not just inform, but escalate. Not just tell a story, but shape how it spreads. And if that's true, then the reaction itself becomes part of the design. Which leads to the most uncomfortable question of all. Who benefits from this momentum? Because attention always goes somewhere. And in situations like this, attention turns into influence, narrative control, and cultural impact. Meanwhile, no clear resolution exists. No official clarification. No unified explanation. Just rising tension, expanding theories, and a public trying to piece together something that may still be incomplete. And as the noise grows louder, one thing becomes clear. This is no longer just about footage. It's about interpretation, control, and the power of what gets seen and what doesn't. And that's where everything stands right now. Not settled, not explained, not finished, just suspended in this strange space where every hour adds more pressure, more speculation,